Assalamu alaikum. Does it sound good? Can I get some? Okay. Jazakallah khair. Facebook, YouTube. Just test the sound. Make sure everything is good there. Please give me a heads up, and we'll give everyone a couple minutes, not a couple minutes, a few seconds actually, just to get everything ready. If you want to take notes, have something to write on and something to write with. Just get settled in your chairs. It's funny, when we used to do this in person, we used to announce and say, okay, I want to give everyone like 30 seconds to get through the chairs, and everyone would be eating snacks and getting the refreshments, and maybe if you want to grab something to munch on while you listen, inshallah, we'll keep it short and sweet. But I'll try to maintain that same spirit that we've been going with our Sunnah sessions at the Tarbiyah House in Thomas, now as a part of TarbiyaLive. And again, while you're settling in, a couple of reminders / announcements. The first is obviously that we are, TarbiyaLive is live. It's our virtual masjid in a sense, where all of our programs are now taking place online. You can find us on Facebook. You can find us on YouTube. You can find us on Instagram. We're trying to diversify as much as possible. Please do visit the website, live.tarbiya.org, where you'll find a section about praying and worship, a section about service, and a section about giving and charity. All three things that we would engage in and participate in actively if we were together at our masjid, at our at the houses of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we want to make sure that we don't miss out on those things. It's also a way for us to remind ourselves, what was our true commitment to the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala temporarily puts us in a condition where we cannot go to his house, to the masjid, do we maintain that commitment, or do we about face? So this is a way to do that. Go to live.tarbiya.org. Also, inshallah, on Sunday we will have our Sunday school programs live. Also, we will have our wellness webinar. This time we'll be visited by Brother Josh. He'll be talking about staying fit while being stuck at home. For some of you, you're used to fitness routines and you're missing out. Others, you're not, and maybe this is an opportunity. This is an upheaval in some ways, so an opportunity to make positive changes as well. Other announcements about various programs can be found on the Facebook page and on the website as well. So please check that out. Jazakallah khair. I'd like to just go ahead and get started. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. Today's hadith is one of the famous hadith on the concept of shame / shyness or modesty. And I know that the word shame has taken on a kind of a negative connotation. But really, the idea of shame and modesty, at least in the way that the Prophet ﷺ is referring to it, is really a beautiful and positive thing, especially when understood properly. And it says something about us as a society and as communities who have taken a notion that is beautiful, such as shame, shyness, modesty, and turned them into weaknesses, turned them into negative characteristics. It says something about us. And it says something about what we need to be working on as individuals and as communities. So we'll cover that as well in this hadith. This hadith is found in the collection of Imam an-Nawawi. It is the 20th hadith in his collection, and so I'm just going to read it for you guys, and then read the English, and we'll go into some of the lessons. Bismillah. عن أبي مسعود البدري قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم عن أبي مسعود البدري رضي الله عنه قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إن مما أدرك الناس من كلام النبوة الأولى إذا لم تستحي فاصنع ما شئت. إذا لم تستحي فاصنع ما شئت. رواه Imam al-Bukhari rahimahullah. So this is a hadith that is narrated to us from Abu Mas'ud. Also, his name was Uqba ibn Amr. Uqba ibn Amr actually, and he was a man from the Ansar. And in it he says that the Prophet ﷺ said, very short statement. He says, "Indeed, from what the people understood from the words of the earliest of prophethood is, if you feel no shame, then do what you want. Or if you feel no shame, then do as you wish." This is a rough translation. This is reported in the collection of Imam Bukhari. It's reported in other collections as well, but most famously in his collection. So this is a very short hadith, and in this short hadith we find layers and layers of meaning, and it reminds me of the character and the nature of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We know from various reports that he was a man of few words. He was not a man who spoke much in explanation and delving into things. He spoke with such an eloquence, though, that he would be able to convey so much meaning in such short words. Right? It's a sunnah that we should all aspire to, being able to speak with such clarity and such eloquence that you don't really have to explain something too much. Something that I think about all the time, and I wish that I could further clarify my words and speak in such a way that when I said it once, it was clear enough. This is the way that the Prophet ﷺ spoke. More than just clear enough, it was incredibly layered with meaning. So he's a man of few words, but with great meaning, and that comes through in this particular hadith. And I want to actually take this hadith in 4 layers. So there's 4 layers to this hadith, and I'm actually going to analyze it backwards. So I'm going to analyze it from the end of the hadith, the last statement, and then go to the previous statement, and then the very beginning hadith portion of the hadith, which kind of gives us a broader context. Right? So if you want to follow along, what I'm going to do first is I want to talk about the statement that the Prophet ﷺ says is from the earliest of messenger of prophethood. The idea of, if you have no shame, then do what you want. And then I'm going to go back one step and talk about the idea of prophets and their legacy. And then I want to go back one more step and talk about the condition of people, right? An-nas, as is used here. And then I just want to talk a little bit about the context of the narrator and what that also tells us about this beautiful hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. So again, the first portion, which is at the end of the hadith, where the Prophet ﷺ says, إِذَا لَمْ تَسْتَحِي فَاصْنَعْ مَا شِئْتَ. So first of all, if you just translate this, simply, it's basically saying, if you feel no shame, then do as you want. And if you aren't paying good attention to the way that language and the way that the Arabic language works, you might misunderstand what the Prophet ﷺ is saying here to mean that if you don't feel shame about something, then it's fine, go ahead. That if you don't feel like, oh, something is wrong about what I'm about to do, then it's okay, go ahead and do that action. And this is something that is discussed in the discussions on this hadith and the various meanings, but this is not the meaning that most of the scholars and the great scholars of hadith and those who analyze the hadith and their meanings, the fuqaha, that's not the meaning that they took from this hadith. Rather, they took another meaning, which is what comes out in the way that the language is used. This is not a command to go do whatever you want because you don't feel shame. It's a kind of threat through that suggestive statement. So the Prophet ﷺ is basically saying, if you don't have shame, then, and now here's the threat, then go ahead, do what you want, right? Whatever, it doesn't matter anymore. If you don't have shame in your heart, if you don't have a sense of shyness and a sense of modesty, then nothing will stop you. Nothing will prohibit you from doing whatever it is that you want, whatever it is that you desire, whatever it is that you think of and your whims come to you. You just do it, right? And we know that that's not from Islam. That's not how we as Muslims behave and operate. It's not at least how we should operate, right? So this, number one, it's just telling us that shamelessness is not an excuse to act on whims or desires or whatever it is, ideas, etc. Shamelessness is not an excuse, right? Shamelessness is in and of itself blameworthy, right? So someone saying, well, I didn't feel like it was the wrong thing to do, doesn't give somebody an excuse from doing something that is wrong, right? Also, it's kind of an implication that shamelessness is so close to hopelessness, that if somebody doesn't have a sense of shyness and modesty about their character, at least in some regards, it's almost as if they're a hopeless case, that they really are so far gone from guidance, perhaps, and from reconciling their behavior with what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants of them, because they have no shame about them, that nothing is gonna make them feel bad, right? Because that's what shyness and shameness is. It's a kind of feeling bad about what you're about to do. And again, it's also a reminder that shame, this idea of al-haya, is important, and it is a good and beautiful concept Islamically. Even if people will tell you today in this kind of don't judge me culture, don't be, there's nothing to be ashamed of, you should not, shame cultures are looked down upon, and shame is looked at as a kind of weakness. And this is not, we don't take that at face value. We don't take it, from society and just, abandon this idea, especially as it is promoted in Islam. Just a little bit on the idea of shame itself, or the word al-haya. In another one of the hadith, the Prophet ﷺ says, so there, he sees these two brothers, the one brother is admonishing the other brother, kind of telling him, like, what's wrong with you? I'm worried that you're so shy, you're so modest that you actually give up opportunities. You might hurt yourself, right? And the Prophet ﷺ advises him, actually. He says, دَعْهُ فَإِنَّ الْحَيَاءَ مِنَ الْإِيمَانِ. Leave him. Don't admonish him so much in this way, because he's shameful or because he's shy and he has modesty. He has al-haya, because haya is from iman. It is from faith. It is a branch of faith, right? In another hadith, the Prophet ﷺ says that the essential characteristic of Islam is al-haya, right? That the religions, they have various characteristics, and haya is the one that defines Islam. And so Imam al-Nawawi, who also, like I said, this is the 20th hadith in his collection, he actually says in his commentary that this hadith encompasses all of Islam. This hadith encompasses basically everything in Islam, encompasses all of faith, because one half of what is encompassed is that shame will drive you away from doing that which is prohibited by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You'll be ashamed to do that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is displeased with, right? So you are shameful from doing sin. And the other half of Islam is that you are also you're shameful from neglecting your obligations and what you're supposed to do and the things that you should do, right? And that's basically all of Islam, right? Doing what you should and avoiding what you shouldn't do. And so this hadith kind of encompasses all of it. Again, al-haya, it's referring to not just shame, but a sense of shyness, a sense of modesty. Now, you can have that shyness and modesty with people, right? Worried about what people will say and what people will think. And sometimes that can serve you well, and sometimes that can actually be a detriment. Sometimes, if your shame and your shyness is misplaced, you might, for example, hide your faith because you're shy, you're worried about what they're going to say. But that becomes a kind of fear, right? Also, there can be a kind of shyness with believers, with Muslims, right? So maybe you struggle with your prayers, but when you're with brothers and sisters and everyone's going to pray, right? Then your sense of shyness, your sense of shame kicks in. I should pray with them, right? In that way, it's serving in a beneficial way. But then, if you're with Muslims who are also not interested in praying, or with another group of people, then that same, that prayer might be missed, right? So still, it's not complete. It's not fully the kind of hayat that the Prophet ﷺ is talking about, right? We understand that this is the kind of hayat that you have with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is watching you wherever you are. He sees everything. He knows all understands that which is within us better than even we understand of ourselves. One of the words in this hadith that I really want to highlight that gives us some further understanding of the meaning here is the word or the phrase that the Prophet ﷺ uses. He says, "Fasna' ma shi'ta." He says, "So go do whatever you want," but he doesn't say "faf'al," like go, act. He doesn't use the word, the traditional word we associate in Arabic with act or to do something, right? He says, "Fasna' ma shi'ta," and the word fasna', right? Isna' from asna'u or sana'a, the root here, it actually means to like construct something, or in this rendition, to fabricate something, right? To kind of make something up, right? And this is the difference between an action that you just do versus an action that you kind of, in this sense, fasna', right? You just kind of make up. It implies a kind of disconnect from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It implies that this action is born within yourself, and you've come up with it yourself, and you're just going to go do it now. It's not connected back to anything that is divine. It is not connected back to anything that is, from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when you are cut off from the source of goodness, which is Allah, the Lord, the divine, then the actions, or the limbs that are cut off, they rot, right? Anything that is cut off from its source, it begins to rot, right? It goes bad, it decays, and it dies over time, right? And so when our actions are cut off from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and cut off from our sense of recognizing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is aware of us, watching us, and interested in the way that we act, when we've cut that off and we just do whatever we want, fasna' ma shi'ta, right? It's a kind of decay and rotted action. And so in that sense, al-haya, shame and shyness, it actually helps to keep your actions and your heart alive, right? Because it keeps you connected to the source of life, right? It keeps you connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and keeps you and your heart alive in that sense, right? And that's why it, shares the root with that, the word for life, right? Hay, right? So it has that same, connected meaning. And if you think about what people do out of a lack of shame, a lack of shyness and modesty, right? It's like, for example, how we speak, right? And sometimes we speak in ways that are very unbecoming, but then we're in a certain company, we're in the company of maybe elders, or in the company of parents or children or something, we suddenly, adjust our way of speaking because we have a little more shyness in front of them, right? Theft, for example. And people are like, well, I don't know many Muslims who would steal, right? Theft seems like such an uncommon thing to do. But, here's an example of theft, right? When you, instead of paying for some kind of music or a movie that you go see, you pirate it off the internet. Isn't that theft, right? Isn't that a kind of stealing? Isn't that a kind of, taking from that person who produced that and taking from the money that you're supposed to pay them for their work, right? You wouldn't, it's a kind of art, right? So you wouldn't tell somebody to paint a picture of something and then not pay them for that, right? So that too is a kind of theft, right? But because it's done in a way where we feel less shame, it's easier to do, right? And shame, like I said, one of the things that has destroyed or has really removed shame from our hearts, shyness from our hearts, is this kind of selfie culture that we live in. And especially now where, you can't even be in contact with people physically. There's, everyone is online. Everyone is on, on some kind of live feed or whatever, including us. And, we're trying to do this for the right reasons, but it's something that you have to be thoughtful about, right? Before just constantly putting everything about yourself online and taking pictures of everything that you can about yourself and trying to get likes and stuff. This selfie culture really eats away at this concept of al-haya. Okay, so moving on. Actually, no. I want to. Before I move on, I want to share a couple of examples of this with you. I saw recently. It felt like shamelessness to me. there was a governor who was saying, I can't remember which state it was, but just basically saying, this stuff, doesn't really, the whole epidemic, the pandemic that's breaking out doesn't really affect us. So, we don't really care about what's happening, in other parts. We want to open our state up, right? And obviously we've seen other politicians. I don't want to, get into the same attacking attitude that everyone does when it comes to politics. But that's, that seems like it comes from a kind of shamelessness, right? That we care more about the economy than the fact that people might die, right, because of this illness. And I also saw there was a picture I saw of a church, and some of them, they have like the message on the front, and it says something like, "Who cares if they're closed? We're still open on Sundays," right? And it made me think, like, so this is just, so the church down the street perhaps closed because of, they understand that this is important and they don't want to get people, sick and be the cause of spreading this illness. And this other, group is just trying to take advantage of it. It seems like it's out of shamelessness, and that's not, obviously it's a church, but that just seems wrong, right? We saw that, a lot of us saw those people on spring break who were partying and were saying, I don't care if I get corona, I just, want to enjoy my spring break. And we felt that shamelessness in what they were doing, right? The second part of the hadith I wanted to quickly analyze was the part right before, where the Prophet ﷺ says that this statement is min kalam an-nubuwwati al-ula. This is from the earliest of prophethood. Now we know that all these other prophets came, right? 124,000 prophets came before the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. That's how many Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent to mankind, right? And we wonder, like, what were they preaching about? What were they teaching their people? Well, one of the things that we can rest assured is that this idea of shyness and modesty, al-haya, is part of what they were teaching, according to the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. It's a kind of glimpse into what was being preached, right? And it reminds you that the entire time, from the very earliest of prophethood until today, it continues to be about good character. It continues to be about perfecting character, right? And developing people's character. For me, that was really fascinating to imagine that 124,000 other prophets, and they're all connecting in some way to this idea of developing good character, of developing this kind of modesty in the heart. It's also a beautiful lens through which we can look at other faith traditions as Muslims, right? We can look at other faith traditions and try to understand, where is that particular teaching that came from the prophets of before, right? Where is that teaching about modesty and shyness before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, al-haya? Where can we find that? And not just where can we find that, but how can we work with other traditions and have interfaith events and whatnot in a way that encourages those things, right? So we look to Christians, for example, and we look for those who continue to adhere to some of their teachings and some of the commandments in the Bible, because they have a sense of, modesty, a sense of shyness about not adhering to those things and just living life however. And then you see other, like in other conservative circles, right, which you assume to be connected with, Christian circles, especially here in the United States, there's a kind of shamelessness while the religion is being preached, and it feels wrong. It just doesn't feel right, right? Look to these other traditions and find where is this kind of haya in them as well. Look to Jews, for example, who stand up, for example, against the tyranny and the oppression of the Israeli government, right? Because they feel like it's a shame. It's a shame that someone would do this in their name, right? Working with other faith traditions, looking through this lens of al-haya, and encouraging them. And before we start engaging in like da'wah and things like that, imagine just working with them on this specific matter of haya. Imagine working with them and encouraging each other to be more engaged, more in tune with our sense of haya, our sense of modesty and shame and shyness. Honestly, in my opinion, Islam would come much more naturally to people where their sense of modesty, their sense of shyness is already, it's already there, and it's alive and well. The other part of the hadith, again, we're going layer by layer. So if you just go back one statement in the hadith where the Prophet ﷺ says, "Inna mimma adrak an-nas." So this is, he says that indeed this is what mankind adrak an-nas, right? This is what mankind still or continued to understand, that they still grasped from the teachings of their prophets, that they may have lost everything else, but these things they still somehow managed to keep, right? And I'm reminded of like nuns, for example, right? I'm reminded of like Orthodox Jews and the way that they still maintain some of those teachings of their tradition, even if all of those other teachings and traditions are lost, right? And if you look at cultures, especially traditional cultures, Aborigines cultures around the world, you will still, in every one of those cultures, you will find a sense of shame, al-haya, and honor. You'll find that in all of those cultures. All of those traditional cultures, you'll find it. And it's a kind of, maybe a kind of connection back to whatever prophet that their people had been sent from so long ago, perhaps, right? That every nation was sent a prophet, right? And we see that. And this is a kind of proof of prophethood as well. Also, it's worth noting that people today are abandoned, like I said, it's the selfie culture, the don't judge me culture, right? People today are abandoning al-haya in waves. And that also explains the waves and waves of atheism, right? It explains the waves of people losing their faith and across faiths, right? Because they're abandoning, al-haya, they're abandoning this modesty. I always feel like somebody who has modesty in their character already, it's far easier for them to come to Islam. It's far easier for them to come to Iman. Whereas you might find Muslims who have faith, who have Iman, they have Islam in their action, but they lack modesty, and it's so hard to get them to go from having faith to having that kind of haya, that kind of modesty and shyness in their heart, right? It makes me think that one of the things that parents can do to protect their children against the onslaught of atheism is to teach their children a sense of shyness, a sense of modesty, a sense of virtuous modesty. The last portion that I want to address in the hadith is, the actual narrator. Like I said, we went backwards, so we're going all the way to the top. An Abi Mas'ud. Abi Mas'ud was one of the companions. He was Ansari. He was from Medina. Right, so he was with the Prophet ﷺ when the Prophet ﷺ moved to Medina, and one of the things that we know about Medina is that this is where the Prophet ﷺ and the Muslims were not just dealing with theological issues, but they were actually building a community. They're building a civilization, a society. Right, this is where the rules and the regulations are being revealed, and while those rules and regulations are being revealed and are being imparted to people, the Prophet ﷺ makes this statement, right, that at the end of the day, this modesty in the heart is, is at the core, right? It's a key element. It's at the foundational level. This is, again, where they're constructing a society, and still, the Prophet ﷺ is reminding people to be focused on this core value of al-haya, right? In this hadith and in many other hadith that come in this, on the same topic of al-haya. And I wanted to end with just sharing with you some of the beautiful benefits of al-haya. I just made a list. They're from the Sunnah and the scholars. So I'm just going to read them off to you. Number one, having haya protects you from sin. Right? Imagine that you struggle with some kind of bad habit. Working on your sense of haya, working on your sense of a virtuous shyness would protect you from engaging in that sin. And number two, it encourages you to do good action and encourages you to good behavior, right? Because you don't want to be seen doing those bad things. So now you want to be seen doing good things, right? Particularly seen by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Having haya makes you more contemplative. It makes you more thoughtful. It makes you pause before you just judge. It makes you analyze a little better. It makes you take time, right? Having haya makes you kinder, right? Instead of rushing to judgment, you're willing to give people a little more space, a little more time, right? You're not constantly looking to issue an opinion, a verdict, right? It also makes you have better trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because when you have haya and you have this awareness that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not just watching, you know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is fully aware, you know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will take care of this situation that you're observing. He observes it better than you, and He knows better than you and I how to handle it. So we trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala better, right? We take our actions, but right, because haya encourages you to good action, but we also we trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a better way. Having haya has a positive impact on your reputation. You have a good reputation with people. You're taken more seriously because you have a good reputation, right? It also cleans up your speech, and when you speak, people admire what you say, and they listen because you're not just speaking all the time, but you speak when it's important, right? Because you have that kind of shyness and modesty. Again, we talked about protection from atheism. It protects your faith. We also gain from the hadith that it is a core value of Islam. And finally, having haya earns you the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, also from the hadith. I mean, is there anything else that we need, right? Trials and tribulations, stress, confusion, the world, turning on its head, everything, going this way and going that way. Sometimes things are good, sometimes things are bad. Sometimes we're anxious, sometimes we're depressed. We're dealing with people, dealing with our own struggles, dealing with the world, dealing with news and politics and everything. We're trying to balance it all. If we just had the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I really feel like we would be much more at ease with all that we are tested with in this dunya, because that's what the test is about, right? It's a test to see if you can connect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and find His love and be in His love. And I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to shower all of us with His love, to make us the people who He loves, and to bless us, and to ease our burdens, and to care for all those who are ill, to protect all those who are healthy in their health, to protect all of us with all that we may be going through, to help our brothers and sisters around the world who may be struggling more than we are, and to remind us constantly of Him, of His religion, and of His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Jazakallah khair for tuning in. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.